Everybody. Last time I did this presentation was for the New Professionals Network for the Manitoba government, and they put me on after lunch, after everybody had eaten pasta. So I was a little bit concerned that I'd be competing with people wanting to have naps and full stomachs. So, and what I really love about the fact that Tim's put us on here this morning is that we're going to talk about branding yourself and knowing who you are and all of those things. So when you have the opportunity today to meet other people, to network with other people, maybe there's some things that I'll be talking about that will resonate with you. One of the things I'll encourage you to do is find somebody else to sit with throughout the presentation. If you're on your own or there's only a couple of you together, this is a great opportunity to meet new people. So be brave, find somewhere to sit where you can mix and mingle. You don't have to do it right now, but if at any point you want to get up, you're welcome to do that. So just a little bit here, if I'm looking at my phone, it's not because I'm trying to multitask. I'm just trying to keep track of time. I want to make sure we keep going here, and I will try and wrap up at my scheduled time, even though we're a little bit behind. And I think we should have no problem doing that this morning. All right, so one of the things is that I had the pleasure, as an elected official, as a municipal councillor, we get to attend a number of functions, and one of the things that we do on a yearly basis is we go to a national convention, and this year it was in Vancouver. And we always have the leaders of the parties, the national parties, come and do a presentation with us. And Justin Trudeau had spoken, and he's kind of the it boy right now. He's the one that everybody wants to meet. And so he did his presentation, and it was really good, as they all were. And I remember thinking, God, I'd love to meet him. I don't know, I'm not a stargazer. I don't have any desire to really meet anybody famous, but there was just something about him I was drawn to. So I was loitering around, and we were standing out in the hallway, and wasn't expecting anything, but here comes Justin Trudeau. And he's coming right at me, and I thought, oh, this is fantastic. What am I going to say? Right? You get 5 seconds with these folks. What are you going to say? Do you know what you would say when you meet somebody? Hello, exactly. Nice to meet you. Great job. We're all the same, right? And sometimes it's hard to remember that. And so if you were given 5 seconds to meet somebody, if you were trapped in an elevator with somebody, or if that person you've always wanted to talk to, what would you say to them? Do you know enough about yourself to tell them what's important to you? So one of the things that I like to do is, it's the who am I? Okay, so what I've done, and we'll do it in a little while as well, is in 15 words or less, can you kind of highlight what's important about you that you want people to know? And so for myself, what I say is that I'm a public servant to the core, I'm a teacher, a politician, I'm an eternal optimist, and I think I'm a difference maker in my life. And so when I look at those things, and if I tell somebody that, people who know me, my behavior and the way that people see me live my life, they would know this about me. They know that everything that I do is about serving others. And that sounds selfless in a lot of ways, but the reality is it's very selfish, because I feel that the more I give to other people, the more it fills me up. And so these are the things, as an eternal optimist and a politician, it always doesn't go very well and go hand in hand, but I would rather see the glasses half full. And then, how many of you have heard of Rick Hansen? Everybody, right? And so I kind of borrowed his difference maker in the 2010 Vancouver Olympics. He did a series of vignettes on difference makers. And I was very lucky. When I was 14, I was the president of my school, and it was when he was doing his Man in Motion tour. So that dates me a little bit, but I was very fortunate to get to meet him and give him the donations our school had raised. And then he spoke again at the national conference this year, and he still captivates me. And so the whole idea of a difference maker is, what do you do in your life that makes a difference for somebody else? I may not change lives on grand scale, I may not be on a national stage, but everything I do to try and make other people's lives better. And that fills me up. So in 15 words or less, this is who I am, and this is how I think I live my life, so that people would know these things about me without even saying it. So I want you to start thinking about that as we go through this presentation, because the whole idea of what I'm talking about here is how do you market yourself? How do you brand yourself? The reality is that a lot of folks that are going into jobs, so if we have a number of students here and you're all graduating from high school, you're all graduating from university from the same program, you're all at about the same spot. You probably have about the same experience, the same education. And maybe there's one job and 20 of you go and apply for it. What sets you apart? What makes you different from the 19 other people in the pool there? What will you do? So you need to know enough about yourself, what's important to you, what makes you unique, to sell yourself to other people. And to be comfortable walking in a room on your own if you need to, and go up and shake somebody's hand or greet them in whichever way you greet them. And so really that's what today is about. And it's not going to be just me talking for the next hour. It's about getting you involved in this as well. If you have questions and things like that, we'll try and accommodate as we can. Okay? All right, so one of the things that I notice is that social networking's taken over communication. I said in the workplace, but I think in life in general. And what are some of the things that fall under social media? Facebook users out there? Cell phones, Facebook, Twitter. I can't get into Twitter. I would never get any work done if I was on Twitter. Vine, Instagram. Pardon me? iPods. We all have these tools now, and they've made our lives tremendously better in a lot of ways. But one of the things that I have found is that it's also, we've lost that face-to-face connection that we have with folks. I have an 8 and a 10-year-old, and we'll be driving and it'll be really quiet, which scares me in my life. So I look in the rearview mirror and I'm like, okay, they're both on their iPods. What are they doing? I'm like, what are you two playing back there? I said, how come you don't talk to one another? We're texting each other, Mom. Oh, okay, so they absolutely have lost that face-to-face communication. Where you're sitting in a cubicle, how many of you work in an environment where there's cubicles? Most of us do in this day and age. And people email over the wall. Instead of getting up and having that conversation, we do everything electronically. So my hope is over the next hour that we can, whoops, a little bit too quick there, that let's see if we can't rediscover that face-to-face communication. Because that is what makes us so interesting. I mean, when you type things on a computer, when you don't see body language or hear inflection in voices or things like that, it's almost like you're missing some of it sometimes. So we're going to have an opportunity today as we go. So the things that I think that you need to have, the building blocks to a successful networking or branding for yourself. The first one is self-awareness, and that really falls under something called emotional intelligence. I'm just going to give you a little bit of a background on that when we get there. Knowing your brand, and that's really in 15 words or less, who are you? You have to be able to very quickly know who you are. First impressions are lasting impressions, we know this, and we'll do a little bit around that as well. The art of communication, and whatever mode of communication you use. We have a way to communicate effectively with one another. It's just making sure we remember to do that. Networking. How many of you are a little bit scared of walking into a room and having to meet new people? How many of you would rather just be a wallflower, right? In a setting like this, in a classroom when I teach, I'm very comfortable, I'm very extroverted, but when I'm asked to go somewhere and network and I'm on my own, I become a wallflower. And so I've had to push myself a little bit to kind of become more interactive as well. So we'll talk about that. And part of networking, the two pieces that go with that is managing the mingle. So what does that mean? How do you walk into the room? Where do you go? How do you stand or sit or what? How are you going to be? And then the small talk. So now you're in front of somebody. What do I say? How do I start? How do we keep that conversation going? And so these are some of the things that we will look at and talk about over the next little bit. So how many of you have heard the term emotional intelligence before? Okay. What does it mean to you when you hear that? Anybody? Oh yeah, I've kind of put you all on the spot. Pardon me?
How to judge people's emotions.
Yeah, that's part of it for sure. Emotional intelligence, the definition I have here is it's the capacity for recognizing our own feelings and intuition, and those of others, for motivating ourselves, and for managing emotions well in us and in our relationships. I like to think of it as how to be a human being 101. How to be somebody that people are drawn to rather than run away from. You can be the smartest kid in the room with the highest IQ and every degree known to man, but if nobody wants to stick around and listen to you, what good is it? And so it's really about managing your emotions, understanding how you tick, loving yourself warts and all, and using those emotions in a way that you get what you need and give what you need for other people. Okay? And so there's a whole series of building blocks to that. But the one that I really want to focus on for the sake of this topic is self-awareness. As self-awareness is the more we know about ourselves, the better we're able to control and choose the kind of behaviors we'll display in a work setting. And this is the foundation for emotional intelligence, and I think it's the foundation for having good relationships with other people, being useful in the workplace, being useful in organizations, and it's a really big part of that. So how many of you have ever been on an airplane before? Okay. It's almost a question should be how many have never been on an airplane? So when you're on the airplane and they're doing that big fancy safety demonstration, one of the things that they say is in the event that the cabin loses air pressure, the oxygen mask will fall from the overhead compartment. What do they instruct you to do with that? Pull it down and then what? Put yours on first. And why do they tell you to do that?
So you're able to take care of yourself so that you can help others.
Absolutely. They tell you to put the oxygen mask on yourself first because if you don't and you lose consciousness, you're not going to be able to help loved ones or anybody else. So you have to look after yourself, manage yourself in order to be useful to other people. And that is exactly what self-awareness is. To take care of yourself or you won't be able to care for anyone else. If you don't know what your hot buttons are, if you don't know how you're going to react when somebody says something or does something, if you don't know how you're going to respond to stress and you ignore all the signs of stress when they're happening, it's gonna hit you when you least expect it. And it's a really important thing to kind of manage so that when you are communicating with people, when you are going to those job interviews, when you are doing that public speaking or leading a meeting, you have control of your emotions so that you can manage others' emotions as well. Okay? So some of the ways that you can increase your self-awareness, the first one is examine how you self-appraise. How many of you have that little running dialogue inside your head all the time? Right? We always have we're always thinking things. How many of you, for you, is it always kind of positive and optimistic? And how many of you, it's kind of the naysayer, it's like that toxic person living between your ears, the doom and gloom. It's really important that you pay attention to that inner dialogue because it can really either be motivating or self-defeating. I know that I can wake up in the morning and just say, you know what? I think I'm going to be in a bad mood today. And all day long, I'm the most miserable person you ever wanted to be around. So it's about getting up, it's about living your life, and it's about being part of the world and looking at things not with rosy colored glasses on, but recognizing that inner dialogue and checking it out and paying attention for the patterns that happen. Am I always the doom and gloomer, or is it just today? Am I off a little bit today? Tuning into your senses. Okay? I like to think of it as that sixth sense, that spidey sense. I very seldom go with what I'm thinking up here if my gut is telling me something else. Because that always kind of, if something doesn't seem right or something seems too good to be true, it probably is, I tend to go with my gut reaction first. It doesn't always work in my favor, but more often than not, it does. Getting in touch with your feelings. How many of you know when you're getting stressed out? Yeah. What are some of the signs and symptoms that happen to you when you're feeling stressed? Yeah, your head gets a little foggy, right? Things don't work as well that way. What else? Yes?
You feel anxious and you start snapping at people?
Yeah, you can get anxious and snap at people. Do any of you get headaches? Do you get knots in your shoulders? For me, if I ignore all the signs of stress that my body's screaming at me, my eye twitches. Because for me, it's a distraction to me. And my body has said, you know what, you've ignored every other thing I put in front of you. Now I'm going to make it so that you can't miss it. So for me, if I miss the eye twitch, I'll be in really big trouble.
So if your eye is twitching now,
It's not twitching.
we should tell you to go sit down.
Yeah, have a little rest, exactly. But it's one of those things, you have to be able to pay attention to those physical symptoms. So if you're in a conversation with somebody and you can start to feel yourself getting upset or getting anxious or excited, you've got to pay attention to that so that it doesn't get away from you. Because when we talk about first impressions, That's that chance where people get to know you and get to meet you, and you want to be as comfortable as possible. Also, your behavior. You'll notice the next one, it says learn what your intentions are. Behavior is what people see you doing. Intentions are what you want out of that behavior. So what is your behavior? Is what you're doing actually moving you to the goals that you have set for yourself, or are you self-sabotaging yourself? When you're learning what your intentions are, how many of you are goal setters? Okay. How many of you have never set a goal in your life? Yeah. It's one of those things that once you start something, you want to make sure you finish it, because if you never get that feeling of satisfaction of completing a task or completing a goal, it's very easy to not have follow through in other aspects of your life. And so knowing what you want, knowing what your intentions are is very critical. So goal setting is a huge part of that. One of the other things is that you have to believe your behavior. Good, bad, or ugly, you have to be open to the idea that there are things about you that are good and bad. You know, for one of the things, I grew up with there's 5 of us. I'm the youngest of 5. We're all fairly extroverted, and if you wanted to be heard at our dinner table, you had to interrupt. And that is a habit that was formed, that as I've gone up into my adult life, I still sometimes interrupt people. I own that behavior. I recognize that I interrupt people. So I'm pretty authentic when I teach a class or when I'm with a group of people, and I'll say, you know what, if I interrupt you, just call me on it. Because I do it, I know I do it, but the feedback you give me is important. So that all goes to your self-awareness, right? The more you know about yourself, the good, the bad, and the ugly, the more you can kind of start to like yourself and recognize that that's okay, I'm not perfect, but I own it. And trust your feelings. That's that 6th sense again. Go with your gut. You know, you can have something very clear and laid out in front of you. Maybe you've met somebody and you're like, I don't know if they're the real deal. Or I don't know if this is actually what we're seeing. And trust your feelings, because they're innate to us and they're core to who we are, and they will certainly guide you in a good way. And then the last one here for self-awareness is you have to pay attention to your actions. One of the counselors that I'm on municipal council with, I am the only woman on council, there's 5 of us, and the next youngest counselor is 65 years old. So there's a huge age gap between us, and they all have daughters that are my age. So I remember sitting at the table at the first time we met them after the last civic election, and I said, how many of you have daughters about my age? And they all put their hands up, and I said, I'm not your daughter. And so we've got to find a way to work together here. So I needed to make sure that I didn't act like a daughter to them. I needed to make sure that I've acted as an equal with them. Because if you don't, people will treat you how you expect to be treated. And one of our counselors, and I absolutely think he's probably one of the best counselors the municipality's ever seen, I don't think his ratepayers know that. Because he doesn't care what other people think about him. He spends probably 40 to 60 hours a week reading legislation, doing work, but he's a behind-the-scenes research kind of guy. His social skills, dealing with ratepayers, he almost, and he uses the word himself, he says, I come across as aloof, as arrogant. And he says, and I don't mean to, he says, but I also don't care. And so he doesn't realize that in some ways can turn the people off that he's trying to serve. And so you need to pay attention to how people respond to you. Because if you don't, and you treat everybody the way you'd want to be treated, they may not respond the way in which you expect them to respond. Okay? The saying goes, if the only tool you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And that's really what we're talking about here, is that you have to be willing. I encourage people to be authentic, you know, be who you are, be proud of who you are, but also recognize that not everybody will respond to you in the same way. And so you may have to modify or adjust your behavior in order to get what you need from other people. And so I'm not saying be a phony and be someone you're not, but recognize that you may need to modify how you communicate with people from time to time to get the best out of each other and best out of that situation. Okay, so any questions on that so far? All right, we'll just keep going, just gonna check the time. How many of you have ever heard of Johari's window before? Yeah. And I have it up here, and I recognize that it's probably for some of you, you may either not be able to see it or it might be difficult to see. So I'll just explain what's up there. What it is there were 2 psychologists by the name of Joe and Harry, and so they called it Johari's window. It's not really creative, but it is what it is. And I actually use this model in almost every communication style class I teach because I think it is so important for us. And when we're talking about self-awareness and finding out who you are and disclosing of yourself to other people, what it is it's a window pane and there's 4 panes. And there are things that we know about ourselves and there are things that we don't know about ourselves. There are things other people know about us and there are things other people don't know about us. So the first quadrant in the top left corner says open. And basically those are the things that I know about me and that other people know about me. Okay? It's kind of how I live my life. People see it, we respond to it, there's no secrets there. To the right of that open is things that are unknown to ourselves, but known to others. You know, that saying where you can't see the forest for the trees. You know, one of the things is that I remember when I was 18, I went to school near an Air Force base, and a lot of the kids I went to school with were children of servicemen and women. And I was very drawn by the regiment of the military. So when I was 18, I joined the Air Reserves, and I absolutely loved it, but I was pretty young, pretty green. I'm very insecure, and I don't know if it's a young woman thing or if it's just being young in general, but I walked around with a bit of a chip on my shoulder to kind of hide the fact that I was very insecure. I thought if I gave the impression that I was in control, that maybe people would believe that. But what I found was being in the Air Reserves, it gave me, you know, I did things I never thought I could do. I've had some follow through on things. But I remember one of the sergeants coming up to me one day and he says, "You probably don't recognize this about yourself yet, but you have leadership qualities." And I was looking around like, are you talking to me? Because I barely can hold my stuff together on a daily basis. I can barely manage myself. But he saw past it. He saw things in me that I hadn't yet discovered because I was too young, too insecure. I didn't have enough experience under my belt, but he was older. He was probably, when I was 20, he was probably 50. And so he had a lot more life under his belt and he got it. And he was right, but I didn't know that at the time. So we've all got those spots in our lives where we haven't quite discovered it, but other people see it. The bottom left-hand quadrant, that's our hidden. Those are things that are known to us, but others don't know about them. So are there things that you do, decisions you make based on things other people don't know about you? All the time. And often that goes to your values. Our values are core to us. They're how we live our lives. We make decisions based on those. I worked for a gentleman once in private industry for many years in a training company. He didn't really care about the education he was providing. He really just cared about the money he was making from it. To be very honest with you, training was just his widget. And him and I always disagreed. And he could never figure out why I'm in the position that, you know, sometimes we have to let students go so that they can find a new path because they're not going to be successful here. And he couldn't understand that, and we were constantly butting heads. And in hindsight, I was in my 20s then, and now, you know, 10 years later, I was looking at it, I'm like, you know, we were never going to get there because what he didn't know about me was that my values were about serving others and giving back. And what I didn't recognize about him was that a value to him was making money, which is not a value that's anywhere on my top 100 list. I mean, if I could just live and use buttons for currency, I would. So for us, it was that we knew things about ourselves that the other didn't. And it really made it a difficult conversation, and I stayed in that organization way too long. And then the last one is there's things that are unknown to us and unknown to others, and that we hope we discover, and we'll discover through experience. So the intent of this model, this Johari's window, is that the hope is that by asking people for feedback, and what is feedback? It's timely, relevant, future-focused information that helps us do better in the future, and it comes from people we trust. And that's a big thing because there's always somebody who wants to give you their 2 cents, whether or not you need it or want it. So the more we're willing to ask people for feedback, and the more we're willing to disclose of ourselves, and this is one of those things, some people keep their lives very close to their chest, and they don't like to give too much. And I see this in management a lot, is that often managers come in and they think they have to keep that professional distance from their staff, but what they forget is that their staff needs to know they're human beings. And so you have to kind of break that boundary. It doesn't mean you have to cross the line, but you have to share something of yourself so that people know who you are. So the more you ask for feedback, the more disclosure of yourself that you give, that open pain becomes greater. And the more that people know about you and that you know about yourself, the more authentic a life you can live, the more you can just be who you are. The people in my life, I'm a bit cringeworthy. I think everything is worth discussing. I won't talk about other people and their stories, but if somebody has a question for me, there's pretty much nothing off topic, because I think, at some point we're all going to be off this earth, and all that we'll have left are the short stories that we shared. And if I can make the difference in somebody's life, or I can warn them that this may not end well, or try it, you'll regret it if you don't, that's what it is. So my window's pretty big, but it means that people know that I'm quirky, and people know that I'm passionate, and people know that I'm stubborn, and I'm okay with that. And they know that coming to the table, and what you see is what you get when you're dealing with me. And if you can get to that point in your life, it's going to make people drawn to you. And I used to care. I used to be the person, if somebody didn't like me, I had to know why. And I had to figure out a way for them to like me. And then I turned 40, and I didn't really care anymore. Because not everybody's going to respond to you in the way that you need to. And so that is really the whole idea of this self-awareness and this branding yourself, is knowing who you are, your strengths, your weaknesses, liking yourself, but also remembering that there's people that are going to respond either in a good way or a negative way to you. And it doesn't mean that you shouldn't adjust your behavior if you need something out of that relationship with that person. And you're not going to get it if you're not able to adjust your communication style. So that's the first piece. The next thing, just checking the time here, is knowing your brand. And that is the whole idea of how do we know how to stand out in a crowd. So, whose brand is this? McDonald's. This one is Mercedes-Benz. And the third one is the swoosh, which is Nike. How many of you have something on your person today, whether it be clothing, bags, purses, glasses, that have a brand on them? Probably almost everybody. And some people care more about brands than others. But the reality is that there's no words that go with these brands. They just are there, and we know them intrinsically. When I see the golden arches when I'm driving down the street with my kids, they're already screaming, "Can we stop? Can we stop?" Like, what do you see? What do you see in there? So we see the McDonald's arches. Cars driving down the street, the swooshes. We know the brand, and branding is the tools that companies use, that individuals use, to let other people know what's important to them, okay? So McDonald's is about fast food. Nike is about athleticism and excellence in sport. Mercedes is the top-end kind of cars that are out there. So it's prestige. It's telling people, this is who I am and this is what I represent. So how about for yourself? There is a gentleman by the name of Tom Peters. He writes for thefastcompany.com. It's an online publication. And he wrote this really fantastic article about branding. And it used to be, when our parents and grandparents were in the workforce, you would find a company and you'd hang your hat there for 20, 30 years collecting your pension, saying, I am an employee of General Motors, of Sears, of whatever company it might be. But what we're seeing now is that people are no longer staying with organizations for an entire career. I mean, some do, especially in Manitoba government, we see that. But even for myself, I have stayed with companies for 3-4 years. I took as much as they would give me for skills. I developed my skills. I'd go back to school. I'd take what I needed, put it in my portfolio, and went to the next opportunity and took everything I could there. And this is what we're seeing with the younger generations, is there's not a lot of job stability anymore. There is a ceiling for people as far as they can get in some organizations, big or small. There is no guarantee in this world when it comes to jobs anymore. You can't just rely on the fact that you're always going to have a job with XYZ, okay? And so what he says in here is, regardless of age, regardless of position, regardless of the business we happen to be in, all of us need to understand the importance of branding, okay? We are all CEOs of our own companies, me incorporated, And to be in business today, our most important job is to be the head marketer for the brand called You. So you have to know what you bring to the table. And it's about not only loyalty to the organization you're with, but loyalty to yourself and developing that brand so that you know what makes you you. Okay? And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to ask you at your tables to just have a small discussion. And if you're at a small table and you want to join some other people, again, introduce yourself, do those things. But I want you to think about this, and I do this activity in a couple of my workshops, and it's very difficult to answer these questions because most of us are fairly humble by nature, and we don't like to focus on ourselves. So the brand called You, think about what do you do that you're most proud of? And this doesn't have to be in the workforce, this can be in life in general. What's your greatest strength and most noteworthy characteristic? What have you done lately that's added value to the organization? In what ways is what you do difficult to imitate? What do you want to be famous for at the end of the day? What do you want to be remembered for? So at your tables, talk about this. Again, what do you do that you're most proud of? What's your greatest strength? What have you done lately that's added value? What is what you do difficult to imitate? And what do you want to be famous for? And if anybody needs me to repeat those, I'm happy to come by and do that for you. But get up, move around, find a group to sit with, and take a few minutes to talk about this. So maybe spend 5 minutes looking at this. And I won't ask you to share those in the large group, but you really, in order to build your brand and know who you are, you have to start thinking about what the good things are about you. Okay, so go ahead and do that for just about 5 minutes. The conference times as well. But even if you didn't get to answer all of these, just the idea of starting to think about them, starting to think about what do I do that adds value? Where am I unique? Where is what I do different from other people? How do I stand out in a crowd? Those are the things when you start to brand yourself. What makes you different than the 12 other people that have the exact same education, experience, and age as you? What makes you different? What makes you stand out? And so even if you didn't get to answer these or you sat there and thought, this is really hard, you need to spend the time looking at that because you have to figure out what makes you great. Because everybody's great, we just have to figure out what it is that makes us great and maybe a little different from the person next to us. So I mentioned earlier on that I gave you my 15 words or less. So I'm a total Facebook junkie because I have brothers in Australia and Boston, and so it's a tool that our family uses. So I threw out there, I said, in 15 words or less, what would you like to say about yourself? So I had some responses. And the first one was my mom, who is, I love her to death, but she says, I'm me, strong, silly, special, smart, forgetful, entertaining, loving until you blank me off. I blacked out the word because my mother has a bit of a spicy mouth. My cousin says I'm Canadian, and she, yeah, I like my mother too. Yeah, she's the real deal, and I think that's where I get it from because she's quirky and fun, and everybody loves my mom. Pardon me? And she's my mom, absolutely. My friend Lisa said, I'm a writer, mother, runner, reader, friend, teacher, schemer, daughter, sister, crafter, romantic, sleepless dreamer. Pardon me? She is everything. She's fantastic. Joe says he's a father, husband, son, uncle, brother, nephew, psychiatric nurse, sarcastic, and very passionate. And the last person on the list, I'm almost 42 years old. This woman has been my best friend since I was 9 years old, and she still is to this day. And she says, I'm a mother, caregiver, problem solver, leader, writer, confidant, and flawed human being. And I absolutely love that because, you know, she has this air of confidence. When she walks in a room, people want to listen to her and they're drawn to her because she's real. She's, you know, she knows she's not perfect, but she plays up her strengths and she's kind to everyone she meets. And so when you think about it, I had said, I'm a public servant to the core, I'm a teacher, politician, and eternal optimist, and I'm a difference maker. So that's me. Now it's your turn. In 15 words or less, I want you to think about who you are. If I asked you to get up and tell us in 15 words or less who you are, what would you say? So take a few minutes to think about that, and maybe if you're brave, a couple of you will share them with us, but I won't put anybody on the spot. Okay, so just take a few minutes. And if you're not sure and you got a buddy next to you, ask them to give you some help. Those in the room who want to give us, oh, perfect, thank you. 15 words or less, tell us who you are.
Well, thank you very much for me to introduce myself to you. I'm friendly, I'm generous with my time and money. Notice I emphasize money. I'm a good listener. That's a really long slide here. I'm outspoken when I have to, not only for myself but for others. I'm honest. Good listener. I'm a survivor.
Beautiful.
And I'm also, I'm sorry. What drives all this is I'm lonely. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. There's a gentleman at that table there who would like to. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. I like to encourage others. I'm reliable, hardworking, and also honest. And I like to draw the positives or strengths out of other people that I meet, and I like to be a advocate for those who are dealing with challenges in their lives.
Thank you so much. Thank you. The gentleman beside you, I think, wants to, right there, I believe he wanted to. We'll do two more and then we'll keep going.
Actually, I can sum it up almost in a couple of words. Honesty and integrity.
Nice. Beautiful.
And I'm reliable and all those other things too, but honesty and integrity is very important to me.
Good. Thank you so much. And one more person? Okay, right here at the middle table, this woman with the striped shirt on.
Actually, we kind of did, we did Jahari's window on each other.
Okay.
So I'm actually talking about the person who's sitting next to me here. And what I came up with was strong, boisterous, caring, humanitarian, always the first to help, comedian, friendly, and magnetic.
Oh, beautiful. That was lovely. It's beautiful. Okay, and we'll let you do that one back.
Yeah, I'd like to speak about my coworker as well. She not only is dedicated, honest, caring, she is also one who always helps the person in front of her to take the next step forward to success.
Beautiful. Okay, give yourselves a round of applause. That's great. Thank you. Thank you. And that's nice that you're able to do that for each other. And so if you struggle with that, like I said, when I was 19, 20, 21, in my early 20s, if somebody were to ask me to do that, I don't think I would be able to think of positive things to say about myself because it was just kind of where I was at that point. But I'm sure if I'd have asked other people, they would have been able to provide me with that. And that's that whole idea of feedback and disclosure and building your self-confidence and your self-awareness so that you can build a brand that people will not only buy, but they'll believe, right? Okay? So first impressions are lasting impressions. And let me just check the time here. Can I have a few extra minutes? Okay, we'll finish up here, but I have some things that I want us to go through here. So those first impressions, lasting impressions. So I told this story the last time, and it's still like it happened yesterday, but it was about 3 years ago. So I titled it, So a Guy Walks into a Bar or a Cafe. How many of you know this gentleman? And for those of you who can't see it, it's John Gerard, Dr. John Gerard. He's the current Liberal leader of Manitoba. And as an elected official, I have the ability to have access occasionally to some of our provincial and federal elected officials. And Ron Lemieux from local government had invited my council to come meet him at the legislative building to talk about issues, and this was when we were brand new councillors. And so we thought, oh, why don't we go to the legislative building and have breakfast down in the cafeteria ahead of time? So because some of us are later than others on a regular basis, they wanted to make sure we were all going to be there on time. So let's meet for breakfast. And we had a brand new council except for our mayor, and he's been the mayor for about 15 years, and he seems to know everybody. So John Gerard was there, and he walked into the cafeteria, and I guess he spotted Bob. And so he came over, and I don't know if you've ever met this man, but he is probably one of the nicest human beings you'll ever meet in your life. And so he walked over with his fancy suit. I'm sure it wasn't a cheap suit. And I was on the corner of the table, or the side of the table that he came to. And I have a bit of a Diet Coke addiction. I will start early in the morning, and I don't drink coffee. I exercise regularly, but yes, I drink copious amounts of Diet Coke. And at the legislative building, they serve them in glass bottles, like those old-fashioned glass bottles. Can you kind of see where this is heading? So he comes over and he shakes all of our hands, and of course I'm the last hand he shakes, and as he pulls his hand back, he catches my glass bottle that's full of Diet Coke and spills it all down the front of him. Now, he did it, but I took the blame because I thought it was just easier that way. And I apologized, but I didn't, some people would go screaming from the room. Some people would make a big, huge production of it. I said, I'm really sorry about that. I offered to take care of the suit, and he's so gracious. He's like, absolutely not. It was an accident. I'll dry. I have another suit up in my office. So that was the experience, and of course I get the gears constantly from the rest of council about this. You're the one who threw the drink on the minister, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, whatever. I'm still younger than all of you by 30 years. So it was very interesting because about a year later, again, we show up at these conventions and often the different levels of government are there. And I was standing with two of my counselors, and he came right up to me and said, hey, Jackie, how you doing? He remembered me from that incident, and it was the perfect icebreaker for that event because now we had this history between us, and we kind of smirked, and the guys gave me the gears again. But it really lent itself to having a good rapport with him. I didn't take myself too seriously. He didn't take himself too seriously. We were comfortable enough in our own skin that, stuff happens. And so that is a good rapport that I have with him. And every opportunity you get to meet somebody, and I don't care about how famous, how much money they have, none of that matters to me. When you meet people, try and remember something about them. I'm not a details person. I wouldn't know how much money or not much money I have in my bank account. I don't care. I need a secretary or a boss. That's what I'm starting to discover now because this whole self-employment stuff doesn't always work. But I will never forget something that somebody's told me about themselves. So when I teach classes, I may have taught somebody once 3 or 4 or 10 years ago, and they come in and I recognize their face. The detail is I won't remember your name, but I'll say, weren't you somebody that I, blah, 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 we talked about this. And they'll say, how do you remember that? Because people are important to me, I remember those pieces of them. And so for us, that was a good connection we had. And so if you can remember something about somebody that you meet, it goes a long way if you meet them again, okay? And if you don't remember their name, you just say, sorry, I can't remember your name, instead of letting that awkwardness build. So this was my little story with him, and I just think it resonates that you only get one chance to make a first impression. And I think if I'd have been obnoxious or I made a big deal about it, he might not have been compelled a year later to come up and say, hi, Jackie. He might have been like, ooh, there's that crazy lady from Richot. I'm just gonna go to the other side of the room. Okay, so don't take yourself too seriously in this whole little game of life.
You should have offered to throw a Diet Coke on him again.
Maybe if I see him again, I might do that. Yeah, I haven't lived that one down yet. I've got 1 more year before we change council, so I'm hoping that it doesn't come up again, but I'm sure.
Just buy one and then say, I can throw it on you if you want.
Oh yeah, I'm sure he would appreciate that. So some things to think about when we talk about first impressions, and something I'm not great at is being on time. So I always try and lie to myself and tell myself I have to be there half an hour earlier than I really do. But being on time is important because people aren't going to care about your excuses. What they're going to remember was that they weren't important enough for you to make the effort to be there. So that's really critical. Dress and groom yourself accordingly. And I'm sure Tim had a good chuckle, but I said to him, I'm doing the same presentation I did for you for the New Professionals Network But you said that there's going to be lots of teenagers there and young adults, and if I show up looking like their mom, they might not want to listen to me. So do you want me to wear jeans? And he says, I don't really care what you wear. But it's true, right? But you've got to understand that you've got to dress accordingly. When I do teaching up in northern Manitoba in some of the government agencies up there, I tend to wear jeans and I wear things that are more casual because they're more laid back. They don't want some girl from the city coming up there in her 3-piece suit and her 6-inch heels. I don't know what 6-inch heels, but that idea. So you've got to understand who your audience is. If you're able to, remember to shake hands or have whatever greeting it is that you have with other people so that they know that they're welcome. Be aware of your body language. Use their name, and that's a great tool to remember somebody's name. You know, if Tim came up to me and said, hi Jackie, my name is Tim, I would say, hi Tim, nice to meet you. Just that repetition of using the name once or twice helps to kind of ingrain it, and then you'll be able to, you know, you don't want to use it awkwardly and say, well Tim, it's very nice Tim to meet you Tim, you know, because then that becomes creepy and odd. But that's the kind of idea for repetition. Don't talk about yourself too much. People want to know that you're taking interest in them, so try and keep the stories about yourself to a minimum unless you're asked. Don't be afraid to show your flaws. It's okay that you make mistakes or you trip on the way in. I was interviewing a woman for a rec director position. That's a new position in our municipality, and she spilled her water on her before she even sat down. And she didn't care. She just brushed it off. She kept talking. It didn't matter. She didn't make a big deal about it. She recognized, we've all been there, and we actually hired her. So I mean, I think that went a long way for her. And then the last one is be prepared. So if you're going to go to a networking opportunity or you're going to meet somebody, do your homework. Understand what the event is about. Ask questions. Go on the website. Do some research on the person you want to speak with. Because the more you know about people and their organizations, the more they're going to be able to relate to you. Okay? Because I've had many people who have had guest speakers come to conferences I'm at, and they have no idea who they're speaking to. They haven't done the research. They just come in with their canned presentation, they speak, and you can feel that there's no connection there. Or I used to go to a lot of concerts, and I remember I can't even remember who the band was when I was just a teenager, but I really liked them. And I got front row seats to this concert, and they didn't even look in the audience once. They just stood there, and they played their music, and they kind of looked above us like this was so beneath them at this point. They've been doing it for so long. I never listened to their music again. Their first impression face-to-face was not great. And so that's why you've got to be very aware of how you present yourself to other people. Okay? The power of a handshake or a greeting, again, whatever it is for you. In North America, handshakes are the only consistent physical contact we have in the business world. They happen first, and they set the tone for the relationship. Because generally speaking, it's not okay to walk up to somebody you don't know and give them a giant bear hug. Right? Like especially, yeah, no, it's not. I mean, I remember as a kid, we'd hug our teachers. Well, you don't do that now. There has to be there's kind of that expectation of space. But a handshake is one of those things you can still go in, or some kind of greeting, whatever it is, that kind of lets people know, welcome. I'm kind of open to what you're communicating to me today. Okay? So I don't think we'll do this activity just for the sake of time, but you want to go ahead and do it? Yeah? Okay, we'll spend just a few minutes. And this will force you to meet some other people that you're not sitting with in the room. But I want you to just take just a few minutes and go and introduce yourself to maybe even just one or two other people in the room. Shake hands if you're comfortable with that, or whatever kind of greeting you want. But tell them who you are and just welcome them. Okay, so just take a few minutes to do that. And you can let them know how they did at the end of it. And so for those of you who are scared and nervous and shy, just kind of break out of your comfort zone here. sure some of you want to get ready for coffee break soon. All right. So was that easier or harder than you thought it would be? It's always worse in our own minds than the actual act of doing it. I know when I was running for elected official, I had to go and knock on 400 doors. It was probably the worst experience of my life, but I sure got over my stage fright pretty quick. So put yourself out there, even today. Just every opportunity you get, go up to somebody you don't know and introduce yourself. I mean, this is a great, safe environment to try that. So we just have a few more topics to cover off before we break. Just really highlighting a few things to think about when you're starting to network. Really the big thing that I want to leave you with is the idea that you have to get to know who you are, understand who you are, start to build your brand, and then when you do all of these other things, they become a little bit easier. So when we talk about communication, effective communication is the process of sharing information, thoughts, and feelings between people through speaking, writing, body language. Almost everything we do communicates something to someone else. So the content is received and understood by someone in a way that it was intended. And that's what effective communication is. If both parties have an opportunity to understand each other. Too often you see communication being one way, where it's, I'm talking to you, I assume you know what you mean, and I walk away. And then that's where miscommunication happens, that's where conflict can happen. And when you're communicating with people, especially new people who don't know anything about you in a networking situation, you need to be respectful of one another and give each other the opportunity to effectively communicate their message. So, what's the meaning of this? When we communicate, very little of the message is actually conveyed through the words that we say. There's a psychologist by the name of Albert Maharabian, and he has a study that he did years ago. And it's, it can be misinterpreted, but when you're having face-to-face conversations with people, so not through email, not through texting, those types of things, but when you're physically in the same room with somebody, very little of the message is actually conveyed through the words that you've spoken or said. Most of the message is conveyed through the tone of the voice, the language that your body's giving. How many times could you say, I don't remember exactly what he said, but I remember he was really mad. I remember, his face was red, his fists were pounding, and he was spitting at me while he was saying it. So I remember he was really angry. So it's not even so much the words, it's all of those other things that make up how we communicate with other people, and you just have to kind of keep that in mind. So if you go to a networking event and you want to meet people, but you're leaning on the wall with your arms crossed and you're looking at the ceiling or you're looking at the floor, who's going to approach you? Your arms tell you people that you're closed off. Looking at the floor, standing as a wallflower shows that maybe you're a little standoffish, maybe you're a little shy. Be brave, just kind of move into a group. Go where the crowds are. Hang out near the washroom if you need to, because that's somewhere people are going to use. Put a drink in your hand. You know what? Unless you've got shaky hands, unless you're nervous, because then that'll give that away. But you want to just do something to kind of calm yourself, to ground yourself. I teach a lot of train the trainer and things like that and presentation skills, and I'll often tell people, just lean up against something. It's almost like a grounding. You can just, something that makes you feel connected to something solid. And that can really often help as well when you're meeting new people. So keeping in mind that your body language will scream volumes about what your words aren't. And you don't want somebody to not meet you because they're getting a misinterpretation of who you are. Okay? So a few communication strategies. Be a good listener. Okay? Whatever that form that takes for you. So let people know you're listening by giving them those cues that you're paying attention. Restate what you've heard, which is just kind of almost parroting back what you've heard in their words. Paraphrasing, it's kind of adding your own feeling to it. So it sounds like you're frustrated, it sounds like you love your job, it sounds like you've had a great time at this conference. And empathy, and that's about putting yourself in other people's shoes. It's not about you all the time when people are talking to you. Sometimes you have to say, how is it impacting them? How do they feel about this? And being a good listener encompasses all of these things. Ask good questions. We are often very bad at asking good questions because we spend most of our time asking those short, close-ended questions, those yes, no, simple answer, and we don't necessarily get what we need out of people in that. So I always will suggest use close-ended questions when you've got somebody who gives you too much information. You know those chatty Cathys who will just take up all the airspace there is? Silence is not permitted. And so sometimes you have to kind of rein them in. And by asking lots of close-ended questions, you can get more to the specific areas that you want. If you've got somebody, maybe you've walked into a room and you found somebody you want to talk to and your close-ended questions are giving you very little information, ask them something open-ended. You know, what brought you to this conference here today? What's been your favorite part so far? It forces them to give you more information. And then once you kind of open that door with them and you kind of break the ice with them, how about asking some probing questions? And these are the questions that get you down to really maybe what you want to know. So you ask somebody, you know, what do you do for a living? Oh, what do you like about that job? What specifically? Are you single? Yeah, that'll give you a straightforward yes or no answer. Yeah, so yeah, you might want to just soft sell that one. Work your way towards that, not go straight to it. Again, paying attention to body language you just covered, and listening to tone of voice, and listening for whether or not they're being sincere, and you'll pick that up through the words that they say, through the tone of their voice, and through their body language. Okay? So those are some of the things to keep in mind. And now, networking is interacting with others to exchange information and develop professional or social contacts. Where do we network? Internet. Where else? Facebook. The bus. The plane. The train. Walking down the street. Where else? Meetings. On the phone. At church. Right here. We can network anywhere. You just have to be willing to kind of put yourself out there. I live in a small town. I run, I walk my dog, I'm out with my kids, we bike ride. I meet people every day because I'll say hello to anybody. Sometimes when I do that in the city, it doesn't always get the same response. People look at you like you're a little bit crazy, but I always say hello to people and try and make eye contact with them. And I just think, why not? I mean, there's always something to learn from somebody. So every opportunity is a networking opportunity, okay? So it doesn't matter where you are. And so keeping that in mind, so some of the things here, conventions, conferences, public meetings, festivals, the bar, training events, chambers of commerce. How many of you volunteer? We have lots of volunteers here today. That's one of my favorite things to do. My favorite event of the year, hands down, is We Day. Have any of you heard of We Day? It's coming up at the end of the month. It is 15,000 youth learning how to be socially responsible. And they're being talked to by people that are their peers and given information that they want. And I volunteer at that because I walk away meeting tons of new people, being re-inspired by our youth, and getting that cup filling up again. And so these are the things, volunteering, you'll get lots more out of it than you think. And so everywhere, when you get out of bed and you leave your house, that's a networking opportunity. So don't pass it up. Yeah, there you go. Networking with your pets, for sure. Okay, managing the mingle. So now you're at these networking opportunities. So you guys are here today. There's a whole bunch of people in the room. I'm sure there'll be other people for some of the other discussions. How do you manage the mingle? Go with a purpose. So do you all know why you're here today? We know what the conference is for, but do you know what made you sign up and come here today? Not asking you to tell me, but thinking about it. There's a purpose for being here today. There's a reason that you signed up, you got up early and you made new plans instead of going to work or school or whatever you do during the day to be here. So know what your purpose is. If you are nervous, bring a friend, bring a colleague. I would do that. You know, sometimes we'll go out, sometimes the girls will go out, we'll leave our kids at home. You can't even go to the bathroom on your own because you get nervous. You're like, I don't want to walk 20 feet across all these people. Come with me. That's always the thing. We go in packs everywhere, right? But if you're nervous, bring a friend because then you've got somebody there to kind of be someone to lean on. And if you don't have that, walk in the room and just find the friendliest face. There'll be somebody smiling. There'll be somebody standing by themselves as well, dying for somebody to come meet them. Be that person. Know who you want to meet and do some research. So maybe if your reason for being here today is to meet one of these guest speakers, do a little research on them. Find out a little bit about them. See if you can't squeeze 5 seconds of their time and let them know who you are. Make a connection. Okay, so I made a connection with Justin Trudeau, but he won't remember who I am, right? So I met him at a conference. I said my hellos to him. He won't remember me, but I also didn't embarrass myself.
It's amazing what people remember.
Maybe. Yeah, he was being kind of bombarded by 1,000 people, but yeah, but it's those little things for sure. Be confident. Even, they say fake it till you make it. If you're nervous going in, I teach presentation skills, and I can assure you that you feel more nervous inside than you're actually displaying to other people. My voice is shaking, my knees are shaking, I'm so nervous. I'll tell people, I didn't see that. You did your presentation, it was fantastic. If you were nervous, did anybody else in the room know? And everybody would say no. So it's never as bad to the outside person as you feel it is for yourself. So be confident, be authentic. Don't be somebody you're not. If you are a funny person, I know somebody said that they're humorous, you break the ice with humor. But if you're not funny, don't try to be. That's very painful to try and listen to somebody be funny that's not. Hang out in busy areas, and I've already mentioned this, don't be a wallflower, and have business cards. Even if you're a student, get business cards made up with your contact information, because that's how people communicate now. It's all through that social networking. And so if you have your email, your website, your phone number, your Facebook, whatever it is on a business card, you can give that to somebody and they're going to stick it in their pocket. And not only have they now met you, but they have a connection for you. Okay? We're just about done here, but the art of small talk is, so now you've walked in this room, you're not being the wallflower, you're going to walk up to a person or a group of people. What do I say? I have no idea where to go with this now. I've been brave, but now I've kind of hit that wall. You want to be the one to make the first move. If you wait for other people to do the work, you may never get the opportunity. Okay? Start off with what you share. So you're all here at the same conference, so you can walk up to somebody at lunchtime, or we've got a break coming up right away. Walk up to somebody and say, hey, you know what, I'm Jackie. This is the first time I've been here. Have you been to other conferences? You've already broken the ice. We live in Winnipeg. We live and die by the weather. You can always talk about weather. It's always a safe subject. Play detective. People like you asking questions about them. And not being nosy and intrusive, but learning about people. When people ask about you, kind of, they're interested in what I have to say, and people are willing to disclose more often. Open up with limits. So again, disclose of yourself, but don't talk to them about the surgery you had last week, or something that's going to make somebody uncomfortable and awkward right off the hop. That's something you might save for the second conversation. Listen out loud, and that really just means instead of just standing there or just not giving any response to when somebody's talking, you want to encourage them to continue to talk. So in some way, gesture, speak to them, give them some indication that what they're saying matters. And we talked a little bit about that already. Give warning, and that means when you are at a networking event, you're there to network and meet people, not stand with the same person all day. So if I'm going to a networking event and somebody's kind of cornered me and I can't get rid of them, I might say, you know what? In about 5 minutes, I need to go make a phone call, or there's 6 other people I want to meet here today. So I'm just letting you know I'm gonna go and do that. And if you want to come with me, you can. And if you don't, that's fine as well. So kind of give people the heads up that this conversation's coming to an end. Okay? Show appreciation. It was really great meeting you. This has been a great opportunity, and maybe we can exchange information. Explain your next move. It kind of goes with the give your warning. You know what? This has been great. I'm just going to go grab a drink now. I see they've brought the food out. I'm going to go grab some. Maybe I'll catch up with you later. It's a very respectful way of moving on and letting the person know that that conversation is done. Or the last choice there is to play host. So take them with you. So if they were a wallflower and you can tell they're not going to do it on their own, say, come with me. I'll introduce you to some people that I met. Or we'll kind of be each other's rock for the rest of the evening. So these are some of the ways that you can handle that small talk. Okay? So safe topics for small talk: weather, travel, sports, food, restaurants. Sports in my family you don't talk about because they'll fight over it. Hobbies, music, and books.
Don't talk about the Bombers.
Yeah, I'm a Cat fan, so it's fun to talk about the Bombers. So not so safe topics: politics, religion, children, because you don't know if people have children, and I find that people who have kids are always way more interested in their kids than everybody else, right? Like I sometimes catch myself talking about my kids, and the glazed over look on the people that I'm talking to, I realize I have more interest in them than they do. So, pay attention, Pets, current news sometimes can be hot buttons, health, you know, and so those are some of the things to kind of keep in mind. Really just watch people's body language for sure. And so just to finish up here, there are rules of likability. And I just want to go through these 12 with you real quick. We like people who like us. We like people who are like us. We like people who can teach us without preaching at us, who can lift our spirits and pay attention to us. We like people who are approachable and are genuine. We associate with positive feelings. We like people who are courteous and are familiar with us. And we like people who don't take themselves too seriously and are beautiful on the inside. And these are the things that we do to make people like us and that we like back. It's people that we have some connection to. So you have to figure out what your connection is with other people so that when you're trying to tell them who you are and build your brand, that they buy into that and they believe it, and it's believable because it's true. So the last thing I'm going to leave you here is from that Tom Peters again. It's this simple. You're a brand, you're in charge of your brand, and there's no single path to success. And there is no one right way to create the brand called you, except this. You need to start today. Okay? So that is where I'm going to leave it today. I have put my contact information up here, but it will be made available to others as well, if anybody requires it. I very much thank you for letting me come here this morning, and I hope you guys have a fantastic day. It looks like there's a great agenda. If you have questions or comments or you want to talk about any of this further, you can just give me a call or send me an email. I always love hearing from folks, and I wish you very well, and I hope you have a great day. Thank you.